Do we have a lot to talk about? Okay, so we are talking Dashcam, which is a found footage movie directed by Rob Savage and stars Annie Hardy. Now, this is listed as a 2001 film, although it was just on the festival circuit then, on general release in 2022, so you may see 2021 or 2022. Now, to add to the confusion, there was actually a separate movie called Dashcam that was also released in 2021, and it's also a found footage movie. And I have actually reviewed that one earlier on a few months ago. Completely separate movies, although both with the same name and both the, obviously, first year of launch, so little confusion there. Now, Dashcam, directed by Rob Savage, is the one we're talking about today, and this has caused some controversy in the UK, actually getting pulled from cinemas. So this had a limited theatrical run, and was actually pulled from the cinemas through being too offensive and too controversial. Now, you may be thinking, oh, does that mean this movie is like super kind of like horrific and gory? No! But we'll come on to why it was kind of potentially taken off display in the View cinema chain. But let me give you a bit of a plot synopsis, then we'll kind of delve into it a little deeper. So the movie focuses on Annie, who is an American woman who comes to the UK to see her friend, who she nicknames Stretch. And whilst she's kind of visiting him, they basically get into a bit of an argument because she is very kind of right-leaning politically, and her ideologies don't kind of mesh with Stretch's girlfriend, who is very left-leaning. And this kind of causes her to steal his car and just basically take it for a joyride. Now, she manages to kind of agree to give this older lady a lift somewhere to this woman who's kind of paying her quite a lot of money to do so. And this is where the trouble starts, because this woman is not quite right, and there is something terribly wrong with her. I don't want to say too much about it, because I don't want to necessarily spoil it for you, but suffice to say, this movie is more like a horror version of Chronicle than any kind of the traditional kind of style kind of horror movies that you may have seen that are in the found footage kind of style of filming. And it's certainly the most chaotic film I think they've probably ever seen. I mean, the camera, if you don't like shaky cam, oh boy, this movie isn't going to be for you, because it's all over the place. And I've forgotten how many times there is a car crash in this movie. It just seems to happen over and over again, and the camera is there to capture every role. Okay, so let's talk about what works in this movie. Let's talk about our main character, Annie, first of all. Annie Hardy plays a character called Annie, and she is actually a musician in real life, I believe, and does a bit of acting. So she's kind of playing a kind of fictionalised version of herself. I'm not familiar with her or the band, and I'm not really sure if her kind of political ideology is a match to what she's kind of portraying on screen here. But she's playing basically someone who's kind of very kind of right-leaning, as in very kind of like, you know, she's going around wearing a kind of a MAGA hat. She's this is all kind of set during the kind of the COVID kind of like situation, and she's like refusing to wear masks. And the first 20 minutes is quite amusing, but I can understand why maybe people were put off by it, because it's 20 minutes of this character being very, very kind of, quite frankly, obnoxious, and with lots of kind of like right-leaning kind of like political beliefs being spewed out to various kind of characters that we kind of meet in the movie. So I gotta say, it certainly gives it an interesting and unique kind of leading character, and I've got to be honest with you, even though I kind of found her character somewhat obnoxious, it is still kind of amusing at the kind of the same time. Now, I have to say, it's going to somewhat depend on your political ideologies. I think if you're kind of like not all that worried about it, or maybe in this sense, or certainly right-leaning, you'll probably get rid of it. But if you're more left-leaning, I think this is going to be maybe a little bit too much to swallow, because it's very, very kind of like somewhat extreme, you might even say. I don't know if it was I mean, it makes the character unique, I would say that, and certainly very different from a lot of kind of characters that you kind of see as a leading role in movies. So I gotta give it props for that. But at the same time, I do think it might be a detriment. It might limit the audience somewhat, because I don't know if it really needed it. I don't think it really necessarily, because the story's not really centrally about that. I mean, there's some kind of like anti-COVID kind of like messaging here, but I don't know if it necessarily needed to kind of lean so hard into it. And I can only assume that the cinema chain didn't really realise it was so political when they kind of were showing it. And only after kind of a few people complained, they sort of watched it and decided to kind of take it off. And I think that's probably why it was taken off the View cinemas. But so I have kind of mixed feelings about, you know, the lead character. I do think it makes for an interesting character. I do think it makes for a very different type of lead kind of protagonist, and there are some funny moments, but there's no doubt about it, she's kind of quite obnoxious and even quite unlikable. I think she grew on me as the film went on, but I can see people turning it off within the kind of the first 15-20 minutes, because like I've said, she's so in your face about the certain kind of ideologies, and people who are very sensitive about that, I can understand why. But if you stick through it, I think even though that commentary is all the way through the movie, it does more focus on the actual kind of plot, and I do think she becomes a little bit more of a kind of a likeable character as the film goes on. Anyway, like I said, this movie is possibly the most chaotic film I've ever seen. Now, the conceit here is that she's kind of wearing a hat which has got a clip where she can kind of put her like her phone on, and she's filming. So she's doing some type of like live stream, and she's like some type of social media influencer. And this is you have all these kind of comments that are kind of going up the side, and she's basically live streaming the whole kind of affair. And it is like, once it gets started, this movie, it is full on. I mean, it's full on kind of like action, scares, jump scares, gore. It's pretty intense, I have to say. And it really never lets up. I mean, with a lot of found footage movies, what you'll find is you'll get like an hour of waffle and then 15 minutes at the end where stuff happens. That is not the case with this movie. I mean, you get past the first 20 minutes, I would say, and then from there, it puts its foot down and it just does not let up. It is just one thing after another, and we see Stretch again, her kind of friend, and they kind of meet up and kind of go on this, if you can call it an adventure together, and it just seems to never let up for them, and it's just one chaotic scene after another with, you know, again, I don't want to spoil too much what's kind of going on, because I didn't really have much idea about this story going into this, and it's not what I thought it was going to be, if I'm honest. I thought it was going to be, you know, one of these subtle kind of ghost stories where you see kind of think, no. I won't say what it is, but it's not, certainly ain't subtle. Yeah, but it's just one crazy situation after another. There's not always from a supernatural kind of source. We get kind of terrestrial issues as well, and kind of action sequences, so to speak. And it does feel genuinely kind of dangerous. And you feel like our characters, Annie and Stretch, the kind of the two characters we really follow, get put through the absolute ringer time and time after again. So, you know, you could just see that the kind of the exhaustion levels on their kind of the faces of it is so like full on, and very unlike, I would say, the majority of found footage films, which tend to kind of rely on, you know, atmosphere and kind of like tension building, whilst here it's just balls to the wall scares and kind of like set pieces and things like that. The visuals, you know, with a found footage movie, it's kind of some people don't look at the shaky cam, and there's a lot of it. In actual fact, this is one of the most kind of like kinetic kind of movies you'll see. And like, again, I can see it putting some people off, but I actually think it suited this film in a way, because it's such a kind of chaotic storyline. That kind of our characters are kind of pushed from one situation to another. I actually think this kind of like this over-kinetic kind of camera work, because obviously it's attached to this woman's head, it actually kind of suits the movie, and it's so like just you're just seeing the camera like whip around all over the place, but we still do see enough on screen to kind of get an idea about what's kind of going on. And there are some quite impressive kind of like effects in regards to kind of practical makeup effects and special effects and things like that do look very kind of otherworldly. And although you kind of don't know maybe what exactly is going on, I think that there's enough there to kind of keep you interested, I think, and kind of give you enough so you can kind of follow the story without kind of maybe spelling everything out for you. I mean, there's kind of clues in regards to maybe the filmmaker's ideologies about maybe where it's kind of like going and everything, but it doesn't really spell out everything for you, I have to say. And I will say, even though I think our kind of central character is going to be certainly unlikable for some, I gotta say, I thought the acting was kind of fairly kind of solid through the movie as well. I would admit I was kind of a little bit kind of put off in the first kind of 20 minutes. I didn't think it was quite necessary. I try not to let kind of politics kind of come into my kind of channel too much, and I won't even say necessarily where I would stand on the kind of the political spectrum, because it's kind of not it's my business, and I don't like to kind of like throw my political weight around to anyone really. But it's certainly going to be a matter of taste, and even the political stuff aside, I don't think, if we go on to maybe what doesn't work, I do feel that it will put people off. And I can understand that 20 minutes is going to be a real test if you can kind of sit through it and kind of just accept this character may not necessarily be someone that matches with some people's kind of ideology, and you just got to kind of like, you know, there you go, people are different. And this is the point that the movie tries to make, is that you know, the people are different, and you kind of have to sort of sometimes listen to other people that aren't necessarily kind of your ideology and things like that. Like I said, I don't know if it necessarily needed to go so far in this, and I do think it does somewhat limit the audience, if I'm honest. Other than that, I do feel there's some kind of issues here in regards to, if you want to be a little bit nitpicky, for example, I cannot believe that kind of the camera would last this long in regards to battery life, and also how much of a battering it takes. Considering there's only one camera here, you know, it's like this camera should be like caked in dirt or blood or broken or lost, and you know, certainly the battery, if it's kind of on and recording the whole time, you can't imagine it would last more than a couple of hours. But you know, again, somewhat nitpicking, but again, is that with found footage film, you do have to acknowledge the fact that you are kind of trying to immerse yourself in this kind of believability factor, or that it's kind of found footage and everything like that. And also, I do think, even though I thought the acting was quite good, I do think some of the humour here was a little kind of like unrealistic at times, when people have such a kind of a traumatic experience, they would just not be capable of kind of like, you know, having the zingers kind of come out like this character kind of Annie does at the times, because she's constantly like cracking one-liners out and stuff like that, despite some truly horrific things that kind of happen on screen and that kind of stuff. I think let's call it the antagonistic force is interesting, and is visually quite arresting, and it has a good mystery, but the movie doesn't tell you all the kind of the answers. So some of you who like movies kind of that leave stuff kind of somewhat open-ended may not be as satisfied as some, because it doesn't tell you everything. And like I've said, the camera work here is so kind of just shaking around. I can just see, I can understand why it might put people off. So this really comes down to this for me. A lot of this movie, I think, is going to be down to your personal choices, your personal preferences, rather than a kind of binary, is it good or is it bad? Because some of the kind of the main things here, the camera work and the character, it's not necessarily a question of good or bad. It's a question of, do you like that kind of thing? Can you accept that kind of thing? And if the answer is yes, then I think you'll kind of enjoy this movie. If the answer is no on either of those things, then I feel this movie may not be for you. So the actual critiques, is it good or bad, I think is, you know, relatively kind of like taking a back seat, because I think the main kind of crux of this, and whether you're going to enjoy it or not, is going to be how you know, what you perceive your kind of personal dislikes and likes to be. So there you go. For me personally, I even though I do think this movie is a little self-limiting in its kind of approach, I appreciated the kind of a different kind of take, although I do think it went a little far. And I did quite enjoy the movie, but it took a while for me. So I'll give this one a 6 out of 10. I think it's an enjoyable film, as long as you can get past the first 20 minutes. And it's a roller coaster ride of gory emotions. Let me just put it like that. So it's a 6 out of 10, but it ain't going to be for everyone, that's for sure. But if you like found footage movies, and I know there's a number of you who do, then check it out, but stick with it if it's not something that would immediately appeal to you, because I think maybe at the end of it you could have still might appreciate it for what it is. Anyway, I'll be really curious to see what people's opinions are here. Now, after I watched the movie, I had a quick peek and it was very divisive. There you go, that's politics in 2022, isn't it? But for me, it's a 6 out of 10, which is a little bit better than average for my kind of money. Leave me a comment. I look forward to chatting to you about it. Bye for now.